People say that loyalty to a company is a virtue. But I learned a painful lesson. To some people, loyalty is just a price tag, and when they decide that price is too high, they'll toss you aside like you never existed. I didn't make any mistakes. I didn't ask for a raise. Yet after an 11-minute meeting, I was pushed out of the place I had considered my second home for nearly 2 decades. But the story didn't end there. Because just a few months later, the very person who fired me ended up calling me in desperation. My name is Jeff Raymond. I'm 46 years old and live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I used to be the head of the engineering department at an industrial components manufacturing company called Morntech Systems, a place I had been with for almost 18 years. When I first joined Morntech, I was just a young mechanical engineer, still had a full head of hair and constantly sweat through my dress shirts from nerves whenever I had to present to management. But I learned quickly. I gave it everything I had. And over time, I steadily moved up, from design engineer to supervisor, then team lead, and finally, head of engineering, where I oversaw nearly 40 employees and managed projects worth tens of millions of dollars. I'm not one to brag. But I can say this with confidence. Without me, Morntech wouldn't have survived 2 restructurings and a supply chain crisis in 2016. I once optimized our assembly line and cut operating costs by nearly $700,000 a year. I was also the first to propose a semi-automation model that helped the company boost output by 30% without adding new staff. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because I believed in the value I brought. Then last year, the company brought in a new CEO. A young, arrogant guy with zero technical background, Jordan McCallan, 36 years old, coming from a finance firm in Boston. To him, everything could be broken down into an Excel spreadsheet. Every meeting he led revolved around costs, efficiency, ROI, and streamlining operations. As for people, those who had been loyal for decades, they were just numbers to trim. I started sensing trouble when Jordan kept asking about the salaries and benefits of department heads. One time, I even overheard his assistant say, "Raymond makes almost $160,000 a year? For that money, we could hire 3 fresh engineers with shiny new degrees." I just scoffed, thinking I was being paranoid. But then it happened. It was a Monday. A normal morning. I had just finished my second cup of coffee when I got an email from HR. "Please report to conference room B at 10 a.m. for a meeting with the CEO." My heart skipped a beat, but I walked in like a soldier. Jordan was there, along with the head of HR. He didn't make eye contact. Just held a file and read a few lines smooth and rehearsed. "Following a reassessment of our operational strategy, the executive board has decided to restructure several senior positions to improve financial efficiency. Regrettably, your current role is being eliminated." I asked. "So I'm being fired?" Jordan replied without blinking. "It's not about your performance. It's just that you're too expensive for the current standards." I sat in silence. Everything said afterward just echoed like background noise in an empty room. No one thanked me for 18 years. No handshake. Just a termination packet shoved in my hand, 3 months severance, and a half-hearted "good luck." I walked out of the building where I had stayed late past 9 p.m. so many nights, feeling like I'd just been thrown out of the world I had helped build with all my heart. And that was just the beginning. I was a bit surprised. But I nodded. "Give him 5 minutes. Jordan's voice came through next, no longer carrying that cold, confident tone. "Jeff, I know this isn't a pleasant call. But I need your help." I said nothing. Let the silence do the work. Jordan cleared his throat and continued. "We're running into some issues with the product inspection line. The new team isn't familiar with the complex processes. And the clients are starting to push back. I was wondering, would you consider coming back as a temporary consultant for a few weeks? Help us stabilize things." I chuckled, a quiet, meaningful laugh. "You fired me for being too expensive. And now you want me back?" Jordan's voice softened. "I know. I rushed it. I underestimated the system, and the people. I'm willing to renegotiate. A fair rate, full autonomy, no direct reporting to me if that's what you prefer. I said it plainly. I'm not coming back as an employee. But I can come back as a partner. On a consulting contract, with technical decision-making authority. And the rate won't be cheap, Jordan. There was a sigh on the other end. Then just one short line. We accept. I hung up. And sat there in silence for a few minutes. Not from joy. But because, for the first time in months, I felt calm. I felt like I was back in control. And so I started preparing to return, not as someone taking orders, but as someone who knew his worth and was ready to reclaim it, every last cent. I returned to Morntech nearly 6 months later, not through the employee entrance, but through the side door for senior consultants. My name wasn't in the internal system anymore, but now I was an independent expert, under a 3-month contract at double my old salary, with a clause stating I reported to no department head, not even the CEO. In a way, I no longer belonged to the company. But because of that, I also wasn't bound by Jordan's so-called efficient management anymore. I arrived on a Monday morning, carrying my laptop, my engineering notebook, and a completely different mindset. No more fatigue. No more disappointment. I came because I knew I was in charge now. The first person I saw was Derek, one of the young engineers Jordan had hired to replace me with 3 new hires. He looked a little sheepish and forced a smile. Hey, Mr. Raymond. I heard you're here to support us. Not support, I replied gently but firmly. I'm here to clean up the mess you and the other 2 haven't been able to fix. Derek lowered his head. The cockiness was gone. I didn't blame him. Maybe he was talented, but he'd been thrown into a complex system with no mentor, no one to explain the intricate processes that my old team and I had spent years building. It took me exactly 48 hours to find the root of the problem. The automated pressure testing system had incorrect input parameters, causing motors to overrun and deliver false results. A small error, but if you didn't understand every layer of the code and how materials reacted under different operating conditions, it was hard to catch. I had personally built that system 5 years ago. It was my brainchild, and I knew it inside out. I didn't waste time with endless meetings. I sent one concise email to the engineering team, naming the people I needed, including Derek. Then I went back to the shop floor, the place I'd walked through thousands of times, and got to work. In less than a week, the line was stable again. Testing metrics matched technical standards perfectly. One of the big 3 clients, a major auto parts company, sent a thank you letter, along with a proposal to extend the contract if Morntech maintained this quality for the next 3 months. Jordan called me after reading that email. His voice was softer than usual. I owe you a thank you. Not necessary, I replied. I'm being paid to do a job. Gratitude wasn't part of the contract. He paused for a few seconds, then continued. I wanted to ask, once this contract ends, would you consider staying longer? As a senior advisor? Or even leading our entire technical operations? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I don't think so, Jordan. I've stepped out of that loop. Now I choose the work I do, on my terms. This time, the silence lasted longer. I ended the call first. Politely. But firmly. In the weeks that followed, I didn't just fix systems. I started mentoring the younger engineers, not as a boss, but as a teacher. I rewrote technical documentation that only I and 2 other senior engineers had ever fully understood. I held a small session in the old warehouse, where I shared stories about times the system nearly collapsed but didn't, only because an engineer was there at the right moment, spotting the right detail. Derek began to change. He started asking more questions, listening more closely, and, most importantly, he started looking at me differently, no longer as the old guy with a big paycheck, but as the person who held the soul of the system they were now trying to take care of. I didn't want to go back to Morntech, but I was glad I returned at the right time, to keep what I'd built from being completely ruined. That feeling of seeing everything running smoothly again, nothing else compares. I left the company right on schedule, 3 months. Not a day longer. Jordan offered an extension. I declined. I told him I was planning to start my own engineering consultancy, only taking on projects I felt were truly worth it. He looked at me with a mix of regret and respect. I walked past my old office one last time. It now housed 3 people, but it felt emptier than ever. I didn't need to go back. I didn't need an office. I just needed to hold on to myself. After leaving Montech for the second time, this time as a quiet winner, I spent a few weeks seriously thinking about the future. There was nothing tying me back to working for someone else anymore. I had already proven, not just to Jordan or the engineering team, but to myself, that I wasn't defined by a title or a nameplate on a door. I had been cast aside, but I returned on my own terms. And that gave me a sense of freedom I'd never felt before. So I started building something of my own. The first name that came to mind was Raymond Technical Solutions. Simple, clear, and carried everything I had built over nearly 2 decades. I didn't dream of being CEO of a 1,000-person company. I just wanted a small team, experienced engineers, people who truly loved the craft and understood that real precision and efficiency couldn't be replaced by PowerPoint slides. I started by calling Carlos, a former colleague who had worked under me at Montech before he quit out of frustration with Jordan's new policies. Carlos didn't hesitate. "You're starting a company? I'm in. Where I'm at now, they don't understand what real engineering means. I miss how you used to teach us to troubleshoot system errors just by listening to the vibration." Next was Margaret, who had been the lead electronics testing engineer. She left during the first round of layoffs. When I told her my idea, she said, "Jeff, I've been waiting 3 years for this call." We started out in a small rented office on the west side of Cincinnati, just 3 desks, an old printer, and a whiteboard I salvaged from the old company. But we had experience, commitment, and most of all, industry credibility. I tapped into every relationship I had, suppliers, senior engineers from former partners, even a few clients Montech used to serve, to pitch our services, consulting, troubleshooting technical systems, designing and optimizing production lines. In just the first 3 months, we signed 2 contracts, one with a small aerospace parts workshop in Indianapolis, and another with an agricultural equipment company in Kentucky. Both had issues I'd solved before at Montech, and they needed someone who understood these systems not just in theory, but through hands-on experience. Work started coming in steadily, step by step. Nothing flashy, but solid. Then, the unexpected happened. One afternoon, while I was reviewing a new CAD layout for an assembly line, an email came entitled, "Urgent Consultation Request, from Montech Internal." I opened it, and couldn't believe my eyes. The sender was Steve Kramer, head of R&D, someone who had once been close to me but stayed silent when I was pushed out. In the email, Steve wrote, "Jeff, I know this might not be what you want to hear, but Montech is in serious trouble. The production department is stalled due to a failure in the material distribution systems control software, something only you and the old team fully understood. We've tried everything, but we can't restore it to previous operating levels. Jordan is panicking. He asked me to reach out to you. They're willing to hire your company, whatever the cost." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my chin. That déjà vu feeling, when the one who pushed you out is now asking for help, wasn't sweet. It felt empty. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt, as expected. I called an immediate meeting with Carlos and Margaret. They exchanged looks, and Carlos asked, "Are we taking it, Jeff?" I paused, then nodded. "Yes." But this time, we set the terms. I drafted a short reply. We agreed to provide consulting and technical troubleshooting services for the material distribution system at Montech. However, all requests must go through Raymond Technical Solutions. We do not accept individual contracts, and will not report directly to Jordan McAllen. Rate, $850 per hour. Minimum 60 hours upfront, payable in advance. Just 15 minutes later, they accepted. No negotiation. I looked at Carlos and said, "They've learned their lesson. Now it's our turn to play by our rules." This return to Morntech wasn't about rescuing anymore. It was about standing firm. Not for them, but for myself, to prove that the journey I took wasn't for nothing. I had stepped out from the shadow of what I once built. And now, I was building something even more lasting, a company no one could ever fire me from. 3 days after we signed the contract, Carlos, Margaret, and I returned to Morntech. None of us said it out loud, but we all knew this time was different. We were no longer Morntech employees, no longer bowing our heads in meetings waiting for the boss to speak, and definitely not justifying every dollar in the budget. This time, we were hired, and they needed us more than ever. As we walked through the engineering wing, a few employees stared, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. One of them muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Mr. Raymond actually came back? Did they really think he could be replaced?" We went straight to the material distribution system, the one causing all the problems. It was a system Margaret and I had designed nearly 6 years ago, using an automated sensor network integrated with load-based distribution software. It had run flawlessly for years, as long as no one was foolish enough to mess with the core control. And just as I expected, they had brought in a third party to optimize the algorithm for energy savings. The result: the new algorithm wasn't compatible with the older generation of sensors, leading to incorrect material dosing, which shut down the entire welding and stamping line. It took me just 10 minutes to scan the system logs before I turned to Margaret. "You wrote this part in 2019, right? The checksum isn't matching." She nodded. "Exactly. They deleted the error checking routine to boost speed. But they didn't update the sensor map." I glanced at my watch. "Give them 36 hours. We'll restore the system to the standard version. After that, we'll talk upgrades." Carlos began verifying each data point against the original circuit schematics. Margaret rewrote the code structure. And I did what I do best, looked at the big picture and reconnected the scattered parts. By the next morning, we requested a full system halt to upload the original program. Operations staff resisted, worried about falling behind on orders. But I laid it out clearly. "If you don't stop for 4 hours now, you'll lose 4 more weeks from compounding line errors. The choice is yours." They fell silent. And agreed. We completed the recovery process in exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes. Once the system restarted, output increased by 38% compared to the previous week, with material distribution errors nearly eliminated. I required a 12-hour continuous test before signing off on the fix. That evening, I got a call from Jordan. No assistant. No email. Direct. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. "Hello? Jeff, it's me. I just wanted to say, thank you. What you and your team have done in the past 2 days, no one in this company even has the skill to fully understand it." I stayed quiet. Let him continue. "I've realized I was wrong to think engineering could be replaced by cheaper labor. You're not just someone who understands the system. You put your soul into it. And I pushed you out without realizing that." I sighed. "I don't need an apology. We're getting paid to clean up your mess." Jordan paused for a moment, then unexpectedly asked, "Have you ever thought about acquiring a stake in Morntech's engineering division?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The parent company is considering spinning off the engineering arm into a separate entity. They don't want to keep managing it internally. If you're interested in owning part of it, I can propose it. I know you have the experience, the team, and most importantly, the industry still needs people like you." I didn't respond right away. I looked out the office window, the production floor lights still glowing. I remembered the countless hours I'd spent here, fixing bolts, writing code, debating with other engineers over changing a module just to shave 1.2 seconds off processing time. I said, "I'll think about it. But if I come back, I don't work for anyone. I run it. I set the rules. I choose the people." Jordan responded without hesitation. If you agree, I'm willing to step back. I smiled, the first real smile since leaving Morntech 6 months earlier. I'm not making promises. But you'd better be ready. Because if I say yes, I'll turn that place into the most respected engineering company in the Midwest. And then I hung up. For the first time in years, everything felt like it was exactly where it should be. Not just the machinery, but my life. 3 days after the call with Jordan, I still hadn't given him an answer. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be certain that if I went back, it would be for the right reasons. I didn't need power. I didn't need fame. I only needed one thing: full control to rebuild what I once lost, on my own terms. That evening, I opened an old bottle of bourbon, a gift from a client years ago, and sat with Linda on the back porch. She looked at me and asked, "You know your eyes light up every time you talk about going back, right?" I took a sip and stayed quiet. "But this time, it's not to work for someone. It's to work for yourself," she added, like she was reading my mind. I nodded. "If you're with me, I'll go back. But this time, I'm buying the whole engineering division. And I'll run it as an extension of Raymond Technical Solutions." Linda smiled and placed her hand on my shoulder. "I've always believed you should have been running your own shop long ago. It's time this whole industry learned, you can't replace Jeff Raymond with 3 fresh grads and an Excel spreadsheet." The next day, I sent Jordan an email. "I'm open to negotiations. But let's be clear, if I return, I want full control over staffing, technical operations, and system training reforms. I also want full transfer of the old engineering facilities under a new subsidiary in which I hold a majority stake." Just 4 hours later, I got a reply. "Agreed. I'll arrange a meeting with the board next week. But fair warning, they'll negotiate hard." I smiled. That was my playing field. The board meeting was held at Morntech's headquarters in Columbus. A massive glass room that used to make me feel small when I was an employee. But this time, I wasn't walking in as someone asking for an opportunity. I was walking in as the only solution they had left. One board member asked bluntly, "Why should we let someone who left the company come back to run one of our most strategic divisions?" I didn't look at notes. I had been preparing this in my head all week. Because I'm the only person in the past decade who kept the system running error-free for 60 consecutive months. I optimized workflows that saved the company nearly $3 million. And I'm also the one Jordan called back, after the people you hired couldn't maintain quality for even 6 months. No one said a word. I went on. "I'm not demanding. I'm investing. I'll put in my own capital to restructure the engineering division, in return for 60% ownership of the new subsidiary. I will run it entirely. I'll choose the staff, the partners, and the operating model." There was some whispering around the table. One woman, likely head of finance, asked, "And if you fail?" I shrugged. "Then I lose my investment. But you lose your last chance to save what was once Morntech's pride, its engineering legacy." After a moment, Jordan nodded and turned to the board. "I support this. And I will step away from any management role in that division." The meeting ended after 90 minutes. I walked out with a draft of the equity transfer agreement in hand, and a strange sense of relief. We named the new subsidiary Raymond Engineering Group, an independent technical branch run by engineers, focused on long-term solutions. I reached out to former colleagues who had left during the restructuring, supervisors, systems programmers, even veteran maintenance guys. One of them, Arnold, nearly cried when I called him. "I thought my engineering career was over, Jeff. They said I was too old." "Thank you for not forgetting us," I simply replied. "You're not old, Arnold. You were just overlooked by people who didn't understand real value." We moved back into the old shop floor, vacant for nearly a year, and transformed it into our new headquarters. The new sign went up 2 months later. Raymond Engineering Group, built on experience. The day the sign was raised, Carlos snapped a picture and chuckled. "Not bad for a guy who got fired for being too expensive, huh, Jeff?" I smiled. Anything truly valuable is never too expensive. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't working just to survive, but living for the work I believed in. 6 months after Raymond Engineering Group officially launched, Montec's entire technical system felt reborn. The inspection system, material distribution, and automated production lines were all rebuilt, not just restored, but exceeding their original expectations. We didn't operate with the mindset of patching things up, like the team Jordan once hired. We dug deep, analyzed comprehensively, and refined every small detail. I retaught young engineers about systems thinking, about how to listen to the sound of machines, how to analyze data with intuition, something no university curriculum can ever teach. One young engineer named Noah, who used to be part of the group meant to replace me, had now become a key member of the design team. One day, he approached me after his shift. "Mr. Raymond, I owe you an apology. I used to think you were just an old guy clinging to a job. Now I understand, experience isn't about age, it's about depth." I simply smiled. "Good. But don't call me Mr., just Jeff. Here everyone speaks as equals when it comes to engineering." Noah nodded and walked away with a lighter expression. I knew, that's how a young person learns humility. And I also learned something: the next generation will grow, if someone is willing to lead by example, not just by orders. One Wednesday, I was invited to speak at a company-wide meeting to share the new operational model. It was the first time I stood on the main stage in front of all of Montec, not as a former employee who had been pushed out, but as the head of a strategic partner company. When I stepped up, the first pair of eyes I met belonged to Jordan. He sat below, no longer with that old arrogance. His eyes held a hint of embarrassment, but also a quiet admission. The silent look of someone who knew they had completely misjudged. I opened with a line no one expected. "I was once fired from this company for being too expensive. But it turns out, what's truly expensive is losing the people who understand the core of the systems you're trying to replace." The room fell silent. Not out of surprise, but because it was undeniably true. I continued. "Raymond Engineering Group wasn't born out of revenge. It was born to remind people that humans can't be replaced so easily by spreadsheets or cost analyses. Engineering isn't just numbers, it's a feeling, an intuition, something you only gain from touching machines thousands of times." The talk ended with a long round of applause. But what moved me most wasn't the clapping. It was the quiet respect in the eyes of those who had once been on the other side. They didn't say a word, but their eyes said everything. "You were right. And you deserve this." Raymond Engineering Group kept expanding. We took on new projects from other companies, ones that had heard of me from Montec. But I always stuck to one rule: we only took on projects where we believed we could create real value. No money grabs. No quick fixes. One late afternoon, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the office, looking out the window at the production floor. Below, white lights glowed over conveyor belts running smoothly. Small humans operating large systems, precise, in sync, as if they were part of the machines themselves. Linda called. "You done yet?" "I just baked something." I laughed. "All done. The new line ran successfully today. We might sign the Detroit deal next week." "So, the guy who was too expensive is now someone they can't do without, huh?" I looked at the nameplate on the wall: Jeff Raymond, founder and chief engineer. I smiled. "Not irreplaceable. I just finally set the right price for myself." Jeff Raymond's story is a powerful reminder that real value can't be replaced by cost or age. In an era where companies often value numbers over people, individuals like Jeff, with experience, passion, and grit, remain the true foundation of sustainable growth. Being fired isn't the end, it can be the beginning of a real journey to ownership. When you know your worth, you don't beg for chances, you create them and let others come to you. What do you think about Jeff's story? If you've ever been underestimated for being too old, too expensive, or out of touch, share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more stories of loyalty, betrayal, and powerful comebacks from those the world thought were left behind.